Just looking back, what are the funniest moments you've had in the game?
Well, it's not really a funny game. I mean, as a player, I mean, I had always a, a sense of humour in the dressing room before the match. You know, that's a good thing to have somebody in the dressing room who's got a sense of humour. You know, to take the tension away out of the game. And as a player, I did that by telling exaggerated stories. You know, like in the village I was brought up, and all the old men worked in the pit. They told exaggerated stories. Like one old man said that he was so strong that he pushed a ton of coal for a mile before he knew that the tub was off the rails. And I used to sit in the dressing room at Preston before the game, and I used to say, somebody would say, "What was your best season?" And I said, "Oh, that season I scored 15 hat tricks," you know, exaggerated with Kilmarnock, you see. And stories like that, I mean, that's just to lift away the gloom, lift away the tension from the game. I remember, this is a true story, we were playing it in the cup final, which was a deadly day, and it was 65, and Leeds hadn't won the cup and we hadn't won the cup. And we're coming out to the tunnel, and I'm in the front with Don Reevy, and I looked round and I said to Bobby Collins, "How are you?" He said, "Oh, I feel awful." See, he was the captain of Leeds. And we had a player called Albert Johansson, and he's coloured. So he's playing against Peter Thompson. He was playing in the left wing, and Peter Thompson was in the same side of the field against Rainey. So the idea of Peter was, if they couldn't get at the ball first, is to stall him, see, and hold him up in his tracks and keep Peter subdued, you know, till the help came. So Peter gets the ball and he's dribbling up towards the corner flag, and Rainey stalls him, you know, jostles him and stalls him, and Peter's, you know, jinking him, but he's not moving. So Sid Owens said to Reevy, he snookered. Peter snookered, you know. Reevy had snookered Peter. So I said, he snookered. This was the jargon, you see, at Leeds. And Bob Paisley, just instantaneously, Bob said, "Behind the black." That was Albert Johansson, you know. That's happened in the heat of the whole thing. The cup was at stake and everything. And he said he snookered, Bob said, "Behind the black." And that happened. That's a true story. So these are kind of things that happen, but there's many things, I mean, funny things that happen. Like, as I said, we had an old man at Anfield, and I used to say, give them the toilet rolls as they come in the door, you know, before the game. That was a regular occurrence, that, of course.
What's the responses did you get to that?
Oh, they'll just laughs, and you know, everybody likes to get a laugh. I mean, if you're tense, anything makes you laugh. But sometimes you can think of major things that happened, and sometimes you can think of minor things. We're travelling abroad, we get laughs and all, but they're true stories, I mean, about people. But this is another true story about Tommy Smith, and it just shows you what the game is. We were playing five-a-side one day, and Chris was in the team, and Tommy was younger than Chris, but he wasn't in the team. And he was always knocking at the door and saying, "When am I going to be in the team?" I said, "Well, I can't play 12 players, Tommy." I said, "There'll be an objection." See, so one day we're playing at five-a-side, and Tommy slid into Chris, and he caught him with the soles of his feet in the ankle, you know. Oh, a real sore tackle it was. And Chris, before he got on the floor, his ankle was all blown up, you know, bloody sore ankle. So this is the way of thinking of Tommy Smith, and all would be connected with us. We're all disturbed about Chris, you know. I thought Chris is going to be out of the game. It might have been Wednesday even, or Thursday, I'm not sure. So as we're coming off from the five-a-side pitch over to the pavilion, which is two lengths of the pitch away, Tommy says to me, he says, "Will I be in the team on Saturday?" He just crippled Chris. He wanted to take his place. That's absolutely true. He's so keen to get in the game. He wasn't concerned about Chris being crippled. He says, "Will I be in the team on Saturday?" And he was.
Let's say you have a young player in front of you, lots of promise, lots of talent, but his attitude, which is to a great extent created by experience, hasn't been shaped, hasn't been formed. What would be your advice to him about his attitude, an attitude that would see him through the game for the next 10 years?
Oh, well, a manager's job is to find out the characteristics of all his players and their temperaments and what makes them tick. and what makes them, boosts them up and what knocks them down. And then he's got to treat them accordingly. It's as simple as that. So after you've been to a club so long, you know all your players, what knocks them down, what boosts them, what picks them up, and that's your job. And if you can't do that, then you're not a manager. There's nothing for you. Some of them, of course, you couldn't help. The temperament just can't do it. So that you've got to forget them. But in the main, the majority can be helped. And that's the main thing for a manager to do, know his players.
So what would be in general terms, you've got the young player, you say, look, these are the good things that you should develop, you should think about developing as an attitude to the game. What would be the categories that you would say to him that he should have in terms of develop enthusiasm, don't argue with the referee, all this?
That's right, that's one of the things that my brother Alec brought up. You see, the things you don't do and the things you do. But more or less the things you don't do. So people who make the fewest mistakes in life are successful. So if you eliminate your mistakes, then you can't go very far wrong. So my brother Alec used to tell me long before, when I was a little boy, don't argue with the referee. No, don't dissent because you can't win. He said, because he won't change his mind because you go and argue with it. And then you'll get your name in the book and get sent off. Now, he said, fancy being sent off for talking. He said, you can't win. He said, you won't upset him. He's only blowing the whistle. He doesn't score goals or stop goals. So the dissent can affect your whole of it. Now, it's a difficult job to change a boy's nature. He might be a natural, moaner. Dissent's his second name or his middle name. So you've got to try and be repetitive. Now, repetitive people can get monotonous, but if they're talking to the truth, it's not monotonous. I mean, in New York, there was a lift we went up in the hotel, and as it was approaching the lift, the top of the we were going up, it said, mind the steps. It was like that old record, didn't it? Mind the steps, because there was a step you had tripped over. So being repetitive, if you're right, is a good thing. So you've got to drum it into them every day, or every match. Don't argue with them. And maybe even the biggest dissenter in the world could be changed a little bit. You could see that he was battering his head against the wall. There was nothing for him. He was all upset himself. And referees are human beings, and whilst they don't try to make mistakes, it's easy to make a mistake as a referee. And it's a very difficult job, refereeing. So that's the things to eliminate the mistakes. And it's the men, as I've already said, in life who make the fewest mistakes are successful. So get rid of the bad habits and concentrate on the good habits. And that's one of the things, how to live, of course, to live the life of an athlete. I mean, overindulgence and all the things, eating, or anything like that. Anything in moderation will not do any harm. In fact, it's good for you, anything in moderation. Food, I'll drink a beer, I'll not kill you. Overdone, yes, excessive beer. The only thing about beer, you can sweat it out. That's one good thing about it. So that if you lose some strength, you can't pump it back in. But if you put beer into you, you can sweat it out. So that it's how to live the life of an athlete. I mean, I got some steak and some milk to build them up. I've done that since I come to Liverpool with boys. Got them food to take. Got them special food they had to eat. Because they were promising boys and maybe needed a little strength. Law had the strength, of course, of character. Whilst he didn't look the strongest of boys, he was very strong. He was strong-willed, he fought with the heart. And the head, of course. Now, Law was easy to teach these things. Now, he didn't argue with the referee or the linesman, but he conversed with them in a different manner. In other words, he funneled them. And if the decision was given against him, he would cut on to a linesman, he would talk to him going back, nice, and have a little conversation with him. And maybe the next decision went his way. He didn't dissent with them, no. And he did that with referees. Now, he was a very good actor. So instead of going over and rushing at him and telling him what to do, he said, oh yes, you're right, yes, you're right. I did that. From my own personal experience, from advice from my brother Alec, and my own advice, I knew early on that I couldn't argue with referees, so I used to side up with the referees when the decisions went against us. I mean, if a goal was disallowed, and I said, you're right, referee, it was a good decision. And the goal was disallowed against us, and some people were going frantic, going mad. But not me, no. And I'm not the most patient of people, I'll tell you now. I'm what you call an impatient patient man. So I used to say to the referee, okay, ref, you're right, it's a good decision. Now, as years went past, the referee got to know me, and I got away with a little bit of something else, that maybe was beneficial to me. So I didn't argue with referee. So law was a natural thing for law too, but I think I helped him along these lines. So instead of arguing with the referee, law just, it spoke to him nicely, and was a nice little boy. And they must have said he's a nice lad, And this was all psychology. This is brains. So it's teaching people the right things, teaching people not to do the wrong things, more than teaching them to do the right things. So eliminate the wrong things, and then you'll get somewhere.
What I'd like to know, question the players that you didn't buy. In other words, you considered buying them for Liverpool, but subsequently rejected them. You decided not to follow through, not to actually buy them. I know that Frank Worthington was considered.
Frank Worthington, yeah, if you want to talk about that, yeah. Frank Worthington was turned down medically. The specialist here who examined our players said turn them down. He couldn't sign them on. Nothing to do with me. I wanted to buy Frank Worthington. He should say, be grateful I wanted to pay £150,000 for him. But medically the man said we can't sign him. So that was as far as it went. It was out of our hands.
What about Toshak? Didn't Toshak carry an injury for a long time?
Toshak, yeah, John Harrick carried an injury. I had John, of course, I signed John, yeah. And then there was another boy from Bolton.
Freddie Hill.
Freddie Hill, yeah. Oh, Freddie Hill was a great player. Freddie Hill was turned down with the medical people and all. And I thought Freddie Hill was the best player in England then. Because I remember seeing West Ham playing one night, and Bolton in a cup tie. We were due to play West Ham the following week. We played at Burnley in the afternoon, and I went over to Bolton to see West Ham playing at night time. And Freddie Hill tore West Ham to pieces. And I said, he's for me, I'll have him. And then, of course, we got him over, and again the specialist said, no. I said, you can't sign him. And Freddie, for me, for 45,000, Freddie Hill was going to be the steal of the century. Brilliant player. Shattered the life out of West Ham. Sheer cleverness and deception. Good player, yeah. Oh, I was sorry about that. Very sorry. Both of them were clever players, Frank Worthington and Freddie Hill. Ability-wise, nobody could turn them down. They had all the stuff. Frank was a good player too.
That's the thing I was looking for, really, which is the difference between, obviously you've made some great buys. I mean, people like Callahan, for example, phenomenal servant for the club. But those ones that, in a sense, made it a very powerful, very strong team into a great team.
That's correct. That's correct. Hughes came in and took Milne's place, you see, right away. And the beginning of the following season, he settled in. We went to play at Cologne, and he played against Cologne, and Overath was playing, the great Overath. And Emlyn came in, and right away, yes, Roger Hunt said at half time, I said, oh, gosh, he says, well, that's it. Hughes was the man. And he proved it, of course. And he never gave Overath a kick. And Overath was one of the best German players, one of the best players in Europe. But we had a system again, of course, for special days, adjustment.
What was his special day system?
Well, Overath was a special player, so he had to get special attention.
And
so Hughes marked him closely. But when we had the ball, Hughes came in and played. But when we lost it, he picked up Overath. And when the Ross, as I told you, got jobs for us too, another special adjustment. We played the Bayern Munich in the UEFA Cup, and we beat them 3-0 here, and we went to Munich. And I put Ross at a centre-half and against Beckenbauer at centre-forward. And he stood up the front against Beckenbauer and kept Beckenbauer out the game. It was a destructive centre-half. And then, at the end of the day, he got a goal and all, Ross, and nearly got a hat-trick. But he stopped Beckenbauer from playing. Because the German manager had said, Beckenbauer not play too good, huh? I said, no, he didn't. Then I gave him a job against Alan Ball once, shadowing Ball at Goodison. You don't always like to do that, but we didn't make it too negative. When we had the ball, we wanted them to play, but when they lost it, they picked up the marker. So we only did it twice, really, against Ball and Beckenbauer, who were two of the greatest players in the world.
Would you have liked to sign Alan Ball?
Oh, yes, Ball's my type of player. Yes, sir. Ball was a special player, yeah.
What about Bremner?
Bremner, Ball, that's right. You're in the frame now.
Mackay?
Bremner and Ball and Mackay and yeah, they're the ones. They're special. And Norman Hunter. Yeah, Norman Hunter was a great player, fantastic player. Good plate skill as well. Tough and skill. Yeah, they're the type of player I'm looking for.
What about those players who very highly skilled players, who promise so much, and yet don't quite see it through? I'm thinking of players like Hudson, Osgood, Bowles, Charlie George.
There's a number of these other ones, they promised a lot and didn't do enough. They just didn't have the appetite. Maybe they was too consistent playing every week, you know. Maybe they played once a month, they might have done better. Maybe they didn't have the appetite for the game, a lot of the players. I've seen a lot of players with tremendous skill and it annoyed me to see them not giving enough, you know. The ones you mentioned, of course, Ball and before that there'd one at Everton called Collins. He went to Leeds United later. Came from Celtic to Everton. What a player. Oh, what a player he was.
But what about Baxter?
I remember him and Pat Crerand once playing at Hampden for Scotland. And England were favourites to win, and it was a bone-hard end of the season, dry Hampden. But Baxter and Crerand conducted the orchestra brilliantly. Oh dear, they played it on a hard ground as if it was soft. They pulled it down and utilised it, and Law was playing, and they beat England 2-0. And the first time I seen a lap of honour being done by a Scottish team. You know, Law was brilliant, of course. But that was the skill, and that's what riles me and frustrates me and annoys me to see all the years of Scotland had so many players and haven't done anything. And you can see a display like that. I mean, men like Archie Gemmill and them couldn't be in a successful Scottish team. It's criminal, really.
Bill, let me ask you about schoolboy internationals. Why do so many promise so much and then not come through, not make the grade? What happens to them?
Well, that's a problem question that I think I can answer it. The clubs I've been at, we didn't get all the Scottish schoolboy internationals, but Huddersfield Town got a fair share of them. Like Dennis Law, for instance, who was in the Scottish schoolboy squad. I'm not too sure if he played or not. But that's a burning question that I know clubs that have had through their books over the past 20 years, dozens of schoolboy internationals. They might even have about 100, some of them. And none of them, or very few, have made the grade. Now there's something wrong somewhere. Now, having said that, I had Dennis Law at Huddersfield. I had him for about 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. I was connected with the club, or maybe more than that. 3 years with Dennis Law, and I organised what he did in his training. And he went into the training session with the Wigan, he was taken out and did stints on his own. And he did a lot of ball work, you know, and then 3-a-sides and 5-a-sides. But he wasn't overburdened with it. He was a young boy, and we were trying to, you know, give him extra food for energy. And when he's young, and if they get overtrained when they're young, you can finish them for all time as a player. Because we had the experience in our family. My brother John, who was one of 5 of us who played football, went to a club at an early age, and they overstrained a heart muscle for him. Now, that was bad for my brother John, but if something happens that's tragic or it's, you know, affects people, you can learn lessons from that. Now, it was a lesson for me that when you're young boys, it was an art, and it's not the easiest thing in the world to bring them up. So this was good for me, that I was very careful with young boys. And Law was one of them, of course, whose training was organised into sessions that he liked. We let him do things that he liked. But he wasn't overburdened with it, because on a Saturday he gave you everything during a match. Run themselves to death. So you couldn't really do it on the field and off the field at his age and his size and his weight. And then we had Ian Carnigan, who came here as a little boy, about 5'6", and I'm not too sure what it was, maybe 8.5 stone. Now he's on song to beat the record for league games in all time in this country. And he's already broken the record for FA Cup ties. Now, if that boy who worked like a slave on a Saturday had been hammered during the week, then there might not have been any Ian Callaghan playing now. Phil Thompson's another one who came with as thin as his matchsticks, his legs, and he didn't look like an athlete or a player at all. To me, he did, of course. We knew he could play. Right from the start, we knew he had the ability. Now, he's another one that had to be, sorted out and helped, and not overtrained. So I think that the schoolboys they get, because of all this talk about extra ball work and extra sessions and training twice a day, now there's a point about that. Now, I can tell you here and now that I don't believe in training twice a day, even for full-time professional players. Now, there comes a time in Liverpool's training, the initial period, that possibly before the season starts, they stop training twice a day. So I don't believe in it. No way. Now, if you're going to train twice a day, you've got to curtail your sessions. So the first sessions, if he's going to train twice, the first session's got to be an easy one. And the second session's got to be an easy one. Whereas if you have a hard session your first time, then in the second period, you go down, after 20 minutes, the players are tired and they're bored. So to train hard twice a day, no way. Never mind about what that's all they do. Now, football is a game that doesn't last for a week. If you box, you train for 6 months for one fight. Football, you play every week, train every day, and you hardly have any cross season. Now, you play squash, and you play none of it out of condition. So to go on year after year into 10, 12 years, as some of them do and more, you can't do that kind of thing. So this training twice a day, as some people do, it's all rubbish. And they bring young boys back and they give them 2 sessions. Now, then in the middle of that session, they're bored. So you're doing them no good at all. Now, if they're natural football players and everybody's signed on and everybody thinks they're good to play, they should be able to play if they're signed on as professional players. Now, they've got skill inside them. Now, if you can get them fit, perfectly fit as a man could be, as fit as that specific player could be, then he can do things if he's fit. They wouldn't do if he was overtrained and he was bored. He would lose a little bit of balance, so he wouldn't be able to do that as quick as he could do it. So keeping them perfectly fit is the thing. Instead of taking them back and by boring them with an extra session of running and ball work, then you're tiring them, you're making them sick of the game. So this is an art. So I'm asking you this question, you're asking me, Barry, about where do the schoolboy internationals go? I'm asking you, where do they go? How many of them make the grade? Not enough of them. Because every year England shows up 12, 14, 20 schoolboy internationals, and maybe even more, because there might be some boys in other parts of the country equivalent to the other ones, just as good as they are. But they can't play them all, they can only play one. 11 schoolboys for England, 11 for Scotland, 11 for Ireland, 11 for Wales. So there's other boys in the fringe who possibly there isn't much difference between. It's a difficult job to pick the best schoolboys. Very difficult. It might be in Middlesbrough, it might be in Portsmouth, who knows. So over the years there's hundreds of schoolboys leaving school who can play football. And there's not enough of them making the grade. Now they've all been to school, but they weren't taken on as professional players from the beginning though. Usually, a lot of them are picked up from junior teams, are picked up from 3rd division teams, are picked up from 4th division teams. They don't go straight into 1st division teams from school. So I'm talking about the boys who make the grade at school, get capped, go to big clubs, and they look like brilliant players. And in 2 years' time, you don't hear any more of them. Where have they gone?
So the message there is that it's entirely possible, it's entirely a fact, that young schoolboy internationals can simply be trained out of the game almost.
They can be trained out the game or coached out the game. They can be overcoached. You see, if I'm going to coach, if I'm going to speak to a group of players, schoolboy players, youth players, big and full-time professional players, if I'm going to speak to them or do something, I'm going to speak to them in a language that they all understand, not a language that only a few understand. And that's what's wrong. And you can get politicians to get up and they can speak in a language that very few people understand. They want to simplify and clarify what they're going to say and the meanings. So you've got to get root of people and then they know what you're talking about. And this is one of the things. Maybe the boys get mixed up with the jargon and the coaching. Maybe they're overcoached. Maybe they're undercoached. Maybe they're badly coached. I don't know. I'm not saying all the coaches are bad coaches. No. It depends on how much authority they've got. But when I had my trainers, we call them trainers or coaches. I mean, I was around the groups. One of them in charge of a group each in the training sessions. Bob Paisley and one, and Ruben Bennett and Joe Fagan and Ronnie Moran. They all had allocated jobs for the day. I was around watching all of them. And this is what a manager's got to be. So he gets to know all of them. Then he can approach them about something appertaining to a player in his squad or in his team. So that's how I dealt with my men and how I got on with them. If it was Joe Fagan and I was a reserve team player, I could go to him and I would say yes or no, yes, okay, and that was it. The mystery has been going on and on and on, Barry, for a long time, the international schoolboys. And how to look after a young man, depending on his physique. So he's got to be trained according to his physique. Now, if he gives you what Law and Callaghan gave me on a Saturday, and Keegan as well, and a few more of them, then you've got to watch what you're doing with them during the week. Now, Keegan has done so much in a short space of time that far from training him before the game at Hamburg, I had him in bed right up to the kick-off. And he could have jumped out of bed and went onto the pitch to play. That would have been better, I think. But that's their business. It's nothing to do with me. I mean, obviously the man's got qualifications, and Hamburg done well. With the proper approach, and maybe a different approach, they might have done even better. But that's a question that's been broached many times and discussed. But where do these Scottish schoolboy internationals, Irish schoolboy internationals, Welsh schoolboy internationals, English schoolboy internationals, who crop up every year, hundreds of them, what happens to them? And this is the question. I mean, are they being coached right? I'm not blaming the coaches. Are they being trained, overtrained? Are they being getting their heads stuffed with stuff that maybe they don't understand?
What about advice to a young player? I know that you mentioned that you watched Tom Finney, for example, kicking a ball against the stand.
That's right, that's right.
And practicing his basic skills.
That's right.
A young player can do that for himself.
He can, exactly.
What would you say if you saw a young player?
Well, Liverpool's got training boards at the training ground that can do that there. It's something tangible to play the ball against. Instead of putting it in the net, it doesn't come back out the net in a hurry. It stays in. So you've got a wall or a board or something to play it against. That's only a help for you. So I saw Tommy Finney doing a basic thing round the back of the stand at Preston. Standing about 4 yards from the stand, he'd hit the ball against the stand and he would take it in his stride with his left foot and control it and shield it away from the opposition. And he would dribble a little bit, then he would play it against the stand again. And he would control it with his right foot and carry it a little bit. A basic thing, but very important thing. Because clever players can come in on the blind side of you and take the ball off you when you're taking a pass, if you're not a good player. And you can't shield it and you can't control it. So Finney was doing basic things like that.
And he was a first team player.
He was a first team player. He was the star of all the stars.
And you're still doing that?
Well, he was doing that then, and that was just after the war. Yeah.
Still concentrating on his
basics. A basic thing, maybe he found that he wanted to be better at this particular skill. So there's certain skills, and he was practicing this one, which really and truly was a very important skill. It was taking a pass from somebody, a sharp pass straight at you and taking it in your stride. Not an easy thing to do, and not a natural thing to do, so you've got to practice it. And Finney was practicing that.
Word that's used a great deal these days is motivation.
Yeah.
What is motivation?
Well, motivation is geeing people up, preparing them, mentally for the game. Maybe saying something that might take some weight off their mind. There's a little bit of psychology. But deep down, the fact is that Liverpool really didn't need to motivate them because, as I said before, that each one of them was responsible for the performance of the team. And we weren't expecting you as a player to win the game by yourself, so we shared out the worries, we shared out the play, we shared out everything. Motivation is supposed to be coming in and jousting people up and, telling them, come on, do a little bit, No, that wasn't the motivation at Liverpool. They didn't need to because they were all the same pay. They were always trying to win something. They were always in a high bracket. And their status kept them going. And you really didn't need to motivate them. Maybe some of them, yeah. Some players, I mean, everybody has them, got them. I mean, we had a boy called Alec Lindsay, and he was full of skill and, you know, class, a real class player. He'd been very a long time, and Alec needed a little bit of a needle occasionally, you know, especially in training, because he found the training hard. You see, we talked about the training, and we had players like Alec Lindsay, we had players like Jeff Strong, players like Tony Haitley, came from first division clubs to Liverpool, and they found our training hard. Alec Lindsay found it hard. Now, it wasn't that it was harder than what they were before, it was different training. As I told you, we trained to play football. So Jeff Strong and them found it hard, because it was in little 2-minute spells, you know, of torture, with a half-a-minute breathing space then and again. They found it hard because it wasn't any harder than the other stuff, but it was different. If you're a half-miler and somebody tells you you're in a marathon race, you find it hard. And so that's a different race.
So this is in fact the exhaustion and recovery.
There's exhaustion and recovery. So we had a killer of an exercise, if you like to call it that, and the big boards where we put Tony Haitley and Jeff Strong on them. And there was only 2 of them, and there was a goalkeeper each end, or a player who represented the goalkeeper. It was only a feeder of the ball, really. And the boards were up because if the ball went past the goalkeeper, the board stopped it, and the game didn't stop, you know. It was continuity. When the ball goes in the net, the ball stops, so you get a breather. So we didn't want any breathers at Liverpool. Even in the rear side pitches, the trainers would, if you kick the ball out for a rest or throw another ball on, you never got a chance. No way. Now that's the attention to detail. We're playing little rear side pitches on the lines, you know, 45 or 25. And early on they thought we'd get a rest or throw, so we seen it, so we threw a ball on quick. So this thing, it was a very hard exercise. It was 50 yards long, the pitch, and about 45 wide. And there was only 2 of them involved in the function. And it was a real hard one. And Jeff Strong and Haitley succumbed. They nearly went down. Oh, yeah, it was a killer. I mean, I told you before that we had training sessions that could have made even that trainer of Hamburg gasp, you know, or the superstars even do the heavy stuff. It was a real control, dribble, shoot, sprint. Control, dribble, shoot, sprint. Oh dear God, it was a killer. And they were little. I thought they were going to be sick, both of them. So we had to pack it in. So we, instead of giving them 2 minutes, we give them a minute. Then we give them a minute and a half. Then they go to 2 minutes. Then after a while they get used to it, and it got nothing to them. Then I said, now you're ready to play. So the things we started, it was very hard. Got to the stage when they could do 5 minutes was hard, to go to 10, 15, then 20 minutes. I said, oh dear. So playing football was an easiest thing in the world. So Liverpool players went out ultra fit, ready to play, with their lungs exercised and their legs and all. So we tried it out. It was just, I tried it a minute and 2 minutes, minute and a half, 2 minutes. Then we could go to longer, and when the re-SI started, we started at 5 minutes. That was hard. And it went to 7 minutes, and it went to 10 minutes. And then we knew that if they went through this barrier, that we're all ready. So we had a yardstick for training.
But that's fascinating, because it's basically, it's short spells, as opposed to somebody running over sand dunes for hours and hours and this kind of thing.
Well, football's made us stopping and starting and twisting and turning. So that's how you train. So this was all but twisting and turning and stopping and starting and getting a little breather. I mean, in a marathon race, you don't get a chance of a breather, or a mile race. You've got to go on and on and on. But football's a different story. You stop temporarily. It might just be for a split second, but you stopped. You can get your breath in and you go again. So Liverpool train that way. So you could have a breathing session of just doing anything else but breathing. Jumping up and then breathing, and jumping down and breathing, and sprinting and then breathing. So this is how they trained. Stopping and starting and twisting and turning. And these fellas found it hard to start with, then it got easy for them. Yeah. So we knew that they were ready to play.
Let's talk about natural players, great players. Who was the greatest player you saw?
Tom Finney. He's the greatest player I ever saw, yeah. Yeah. Tommy Finney was about 5'7", 7.5. 11 stone. He had strong, sturdy legs. His calves were strong, and he didn't have a big frame, you know. Which means he could let off the floor into the air. He was good in the air. He was sturdy legged. He was naturally left-footed. His control of the ball, closely control, was unbelievable. And he could attack you from the front, facing you, and run past you. Just shake yourself and you've gone. You've lost. A lot of players can play with their back to the goal or sideways and they get away with it. But he could turn around and face you, go up to you and deceive you, which is a difficult thing to do. And there's very few people in the game today who can do that kind of thing. There's a number of them set to do it. Peter Barnes was good at it, but Thomas was closer control than Peter Barnes. Peter Barnes makes an attempt to that, and a very good attempt, he's a good player. And but Finney was so close to his control that he never lost possession. It was always his. And he was crafty, he knew where you were, and he had always the ball the furthest away from you, or his opponent. If you were on the left-hand side, Tommy had the ball on the right-hand side. So you had to foul him to get at it. And if he switched it around to the other side, he switched it and all. All the great players had a great awareness, not only of his own ability, but of your ability too. So they would deal with you the way they thought you should be dealt with. So that Tommy Finney, his control was close, he was quick, he was elusive, he was on the byline, I don't know how many times, rolling balls back. Race Carter once told me, he said, if I played with him, he said, I don't know how many goals I would score in a season. He said, all I need to do is leather him into the net, and Carter could leather him into the net, incidentally. He'd have filled the net up if he played with Tommy Finney in a team, in the same league team, at the peak, the both of them. Carter might have scored 100 goals of a season of him. So that was Tommy Finney. He had all the attributes and all the awareness and aware of his opposition. But above all, in the 18 yards box, if he got inside it, then he made a beeline for the 18 yards box. So when you tucked him inside that, it's a penalty. So he had the ability to beat you inside the 18 yards box. Now as you approach the goal, the pitch gets narrower. In the 18 yards box, it's smaller again, hence the congestion. And Tommy could beat you inside the 6 yards box. No disrespect to all the players who have been great players. George Best, a great player. Stan Matthews, a great player. Fantastic player, pace, everything, you name it, elusiveness. But Tommy had a ball, had more control of the ball than them. It was his. When he had it, it was his. And he was carrying it, it was still his. Some of them are carrying it, but it's not theirs. I couldn't emphasise any more. I mean, Cruyff, he could play in a different way, of course. Tommy was a player who was in a place where he could puncture a team from the wings, down the flanks, and get to the byline. When you get to the byline, the whole game changes. Cruyff and them didn't get to the byline. They weren't flank men, they weren't wide players like Finney and Matthews. Copa, Real and Hento, both they could play. They were clever at that. They were in a bigger hurry than Tommy Finney. They all seemed to be doing it in a bigger hurry than Tommy. Thomas was more composed. They were more showy and flashy, and twisty and turny. Thomas was more composed.
Put a price on him in today's market.
Oh, Tommy Finney, you couldn't even talk about him for less than £5 million. No, no way. And if I was a manager of a club and Tommy Finney was at his peak, I would have paid £5 million for him. Yes. Knowing what I know about him now, yeah, without doubt.
Fantastic.
Yes, no danger about that.
Tommy Docherty, for example, took over your shirt in the Preston team.
He did. Tommy came to Preston a few months after I left. Maybe the following season. I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you. I think so. Came about 1950 to Preston, and played right half. Yeah, the same type of player as me, Tommy. And I wrote to him and said, just put the jersey on, Tommy, and let it run round. It'll guide you around. You know, number 4. Came and did very well. A very, very good buy from Preston, I think. £4,000 from Celtic. Good player, hard man. I love Tommy Docherty in my team. I once said to Tommy Docherty, this is one of Tommy's jokes, if I had 5 Bill Shanklys and 5 Tommy Dochertys and a goalkeeper, I said, we would beat the world, Tommy. He said, listen, if there was 5 Bill Shanklys and 5 Tommy Dochertys, they wouldn't need a goalkeeper.
What about Tommy Lawton?
Tommy Lawton? Oh yeah, big player, great player.
And what about coming in with some of the more recent players? Law, Best?
Law, yes, Law was a special player. Yeah, great player. Full of enthusiasm for the game, full of awareness. Like Jimmy Greaves, of course. He scored the goals he should score. That's what made Jimmy Greaves so special. Jimmy Greaves is a great player. He stuck them in the back of the net regularly. The ones he should score. Now this is funny, you're saying that. The ones he should score, he scored. And a lot of them score spectacular goals, but the one they should score, they don't. So if Law and Jimmy Greaves scored the goals they should score, that's enough for anybody. So Jimmy stuck all the ones in that he should stick in, and so did Law. Took the side of their feet and said thanks very much. He didn't blast them or try to burst the net. All they wanted to do was to get the ball over the line, and they did it. So Law, yes, Lawton was a different player from Law, of course. Brilliant in the air, good with his feet. Law was brilliant in the air, good with his feet. Quicker than the rest of them, I think, in the box. Very, very quick. Because he was lean, he didn't carry any weight. And above all, it was the awareness of Jimmy Greaves. If he side footed it in the net, that was it. So you don't have any chance against him.
Funny thing about Greaves is that I've watched Greaves for about 10 years. When he got the ball, there was a certainty about it, that he could score. It was on.
Predictable. He knew that he could score. Jimmy Greaves was a Mannion, a Carter, a Doherty, a Lynn Shackleton. They were all, blessed with confidence. Law. It was a gift that we're gifted with, If Jimmy Greaves and Dennis Law and a number of these other players were through on their own, with only the goalkeeper to beat, you could get your tea out and drink it. It's going to be a goal. They knew how to deal with the goal. If he stayed in the goal, they'd carry it up to him and put it past him. If they come out, they ran past, angled themselves and put it in from a bad angle. Because if there's no goalkeeper in, Jimmy Greaves will score a goal if he's a foot of the byline, and Law as well. So what I'm trying to say is that all the players that's playing now, or ever played, they should know what to do when they're ruining their own and only the goalkeeper to beat. Now, how many times have you seen them through and missing them? Hitting them over the bar, trying to chip them, doing the wrong thing. Every player should be taught what to do in every situation. If the goalkeeper stays, they do something else. If he comes out, they do something else. Law and Greaves and Doherty, Peter Doherty, and they knew what to do. So that if the goalkeeper stayed in, Jimmy used to take up to and say, thanks very much. If he come out, he sidestepped him and angled himself and put it in the empty net. So these are the things that these men knew.
What's the greatest game you've ever seen? The greatest game in general terms, and then the greatest Liverpool game.
Well, the greatest game I've ever seen, that would be difficult to say. It was very one-sided. It was Eintracht at Frankfurt, I think, and Real at Hampden. I'm not too sure if it was the greatest game because the Real scored 7 goals, and that was great, of course, the goal scoring. I think the toughest game I've seen, and the most tense game I've ever seen, was between Man United and Real in the European Cup at Old Trafford. When they had got beaten there, United, and they were down 2-0 in 10 minutes at Old Trafford. It was a draw to each. I think that was the tensest game I've seen. There were really something at stake, the European Cup. But I think for me to sit down and say now the greatest game I've ever seen, I mean that's a very difficult thing to say. As a spectacle, possibly the Real Eintracht game, where there was goals as well as football. And I think if Real Madrid's involved in it, I mean that's something. In the friendly match when Real won 5-1, I mean they gave an exhibition that night after they scored the goals. They started playing it and doing tricks with it. But maybe the 7 goals, 3 goals, or the tennis game at Old Trafford. As far as Liverpool are concerned, I mean all the games of Liverpool were the greatest games because Liverpool's the greatest team. I think that the greatest night at Anfield against the unofficial champions of the world was when we'd won the cup on the Saturday, and on the Monday night we played the great international of Milan in Anfield, and we won 3-1. The gates were closed, and we beaten the team that was considered the champions of the world. They'd won the European Cup and the South American Championship playoff, the club match, and we beat them 3-1 at Anfield. And I've never known such an atmosphere, because the cup had been brought out to Anfield for the first time. We were playing international at Milan with the great Herrera, Suarez, Facchetti, great players, Jair, Mazzoli, they were players, they rolled, and we won 3-1, and we could have won 4-1 because we had a goal disallowed. I think that's the greatest, maybe that's the greatest game I've seen. I think I'd have to say that the Real thing at Hampden was a procession. This wasn't really a procession. This was a game we were pitting our wits against the elite, and we beat them. And the fact that the Liverpool won the cup, I think all told, that must go down as the greatest game I've ever seen, after we won the cup. Atmosphere, excitement, above all football, and a ground that was dry and bare and bumpy, and not our pitch. It was a continental pitch maybe, but not ours. But Liverpool raised up that night their standard into a tremendous height. And Roger Hunt scored a goal, like they hit it from about 3 feet high and scooped it, you know. And Herrera said, that's not an English goal, that's a continental goal, which it was, you see. And this was all from the training sessions, the training boards at Melwood. Roger got this goal, he got a few that season from the training boards, he scooped them. So I think that I must change my mind and say that International of Milan at Anfield, after the cup final in '65, was the greatest game I've seen.
We haven't mentioned Pele. What did you think of
Oh, Pele was a great player. I mean, he must rank amongst them all. I mean, I say Tommy Finney's the greatest player I've ever seen, and I still say that Tommy Finney's the greatest player. But when you bracket him with Cruyff and Pele and Di Stefano and these people, I mean, they're all brilliant. I mean, it's, I say I don't like to separate them out, but Pele goes down amongst the greatest players of all time. Not only could he play with skill and ability, but he was as strong as an ox. I mean, he was a light heavyweight, a bone and muscle, and could run like a gazelle, a strong fella like Eusebio. This is the same brackets. Maybe Eusebio was a little bit in front of him because he was taller and quicker. But Pele is a great player. Oh yeah, brilliant. That Brazil team was brilliant. They're next to Real, for me.
What about the great foreign players, Puskás?
Oh, Puskás, yeah, well, I saw Puskás in '53 with Hungary. I was at the game, luckily. I was glad I was there because I remember a ball, it was the markings on it. As he was hitting it, it was propelling, and as it was reaching its target, it was spinning like Jack Nicklaus had a golf ball, you know. And they could see the ball had reversed itself, and I could see the markings on the ball. As it reached its point, it might have been Hediguti, but it was approaching its target, it was slowing down. Like Wolfie Mannion did once I was playing, and all the same thing. The ball, as it reached its target, it was slowing down, ready to control. So the Puskás to do that. Puskás, he came here with a Greek team to play Everton, and they trained at our training ground. And he was giving them a training session, he was giving the goalkeepers some practice. And I was there, and I think all the Greeks in Liverpool were there incidentally, because I got invitation to fish and chips with all of them for the rest of my life. And he put the ball in the 18-yard spot, in the centre of the 18 yards from goal, right in the centre. And he hit the ball with his left foot, a foot inside the post. He did it 12 times in succession. Hit the whole lot of them inside the post, a foot from the post.
This is comparatively...
He'd finished playing then. Yeah. So I don't know what he'd done from 12 yards with a penalty. He lashed it just a few inches above the grass into the corner of the net. Because I wanted to see him doing it, and he did it. Puskás, Hediguti could play. All the players could play. Real was possibly the greatest of all, of course.
Well, that's the next question I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
But,
See, Real Madrid, I think, were the greatest professional team that ever played. Not only for their display in Glasgow, when they scored 7 goals against the German team. I saw them at Old Trafford one night, in the European Cup. They'd won 3-0, I think, there, and they drew. We were winning 2-0 Old Trafford, and at the end of the game it was a draw. It was a pretty rough match. But they came back later and played a friendly, but really there's no friendlies when you play them. And Man United were marking man for man. And they beat Man United 5-1. And it wasn't Kento, Copa, Di Stefano, who was a magnificent man, and a big man incidentally. It was Di Stefano, big strong fella. Maybe there's nobody better than him. It was the players that you don't hear talked about. It was the centre-half from Uruguay, Santa Maria. Jumped the height of the crossbar at centre-back. Number 4, Real. A brilliant player. Nobody speaks about him at all. That night he was the one that caused all the damage at Old Trafford, Real. They took the markers out of the way, they were marking man for man. So Stefano and them took the markers out of the way, and Real cut United to pieces. Not only could the Copa play, and Gento play, and Puskás play, but the players that you don't mention, you don't hear them talking about Real, number 4, and Santa Maria. he was Copagento, who could slice you apart, with pace and cleverness. In the modern football, they'll get 4-4-2 against him, of course. If there's any such thing as modern football, I don't think there's any such thing as modern football. Times adjust and things change, and sometimes there's no wingers, and then the loose centre backs. There's a shortage of all. There's always a shortage of a certain player. There's a shortage of wingers at the moment. There's a shortage of so and so. There's a shortage of strikers. I think that I must say that as a professional team, they were magnificent, individually and collectively. They could play it around in little rings if they wanted to play, all day long, the same as they can do now. They could, with the players that the teams are doing now at the back, building up at the back, they could do that up the front, outside the box, have a little game, and then have a shot at goal. So I would think Real was the best team that I've ever seen.
Let's talk about the great Liverpool players. Who were the great Liverpool players?
The Liverpool players. Talking about any other players is another story, but I don't like to put one in front of another, because for me, all my players were the best. They all gave everything they had, and I got as much for them as I could. I worked for them and they worked for me, and I'm loath to put one in front of another. I said that the beginning of Liverpool was Yeats and St John, and that's true. They all played well. There was Jerry Byrne. You don't hear many be talking about him, but Jerry Byrne was a fantastic player. Jerry Byrne did what nobody else in the world could have done. He played at Wembley for 2 hours with a broken collarbone. 5 minutes after the game started, he got it, and he played an hour and a half, then a half an hour. Now that we're talking about attention to detail, just before we go on about the rest of the players, we didn't give our hand away. Bob Paisley came off and he said to me, his collarbone's gone. So we just left him over in the left back position, holding his arm. Nobody knew bad Bob Paisley and me till half time. The rest of them knew. And this had happened to me and Andy Beattie at Blackpool. We played for North End after the war, and Andy Beattie said at half time, I've strained a leg, And I said, well, I'll leave it to Andy. He said, we might not got much to do, I was playing right half, he was playing right back. I said, you might not got much to do, Andy, but take a chance in it, And we fiddled through. And there wasn't much pressure on him, and he got through the game. And we didn't give our hand away. See, there was no substitutes then. Either went to another position, maybe stood around the pitch, or you went off. So we got through the game. So when this happened at Wembley, from my past experience with Andy Beattie and myself, this happened. And I said to Bob, well, we'll just leave it. And at half time we knew it was broken. It was grinding, The doctor was trying to freeze it, but couldn't. So we just let him stay there. But Leeds United didn't know his collarbone was broken. So we kept it a secret. And he played for 2 hours nearly 2 hours with a broken collarbone. Now, if we'd have said, right, we're going to play him outside left now, we take him out the road, it's too dangerous. We took that chance at Wembley. And we got out of it. We won the cup. Jerry Byrne, it was a terrible decision, but it happened to me. And Byrne, of course, a terrible thing, a broken collarbone, because it was grinding and hurting him. But Byrne should have got all the medals for the match. He was the hero. But there you are, that was a little bit of psychology and all. We didn't give our hand away. Nobody knew about it till the game was finished. So Byrne was one of the great players. Lawler could play. Tommy Smith, of course, was a brilliant player. Fantastic player. And Tommy Lawrence in goal did well and all. We were looking for a goalkeeper bigger than Tommy. Tommy was thick set, but not tall enough. But Tommy did well, they all did well. But Tommy Smith was a great player, right from the 16-year-old. Tommy Smith was ready for the big team at 17. Not only was he a hard man, but he could play. And Yeats, of course, we talked about him. Wally Stevenson had his characteristics. He could drive balls 50 yards, pinpointed, They all had a role to play. And then Gordon Milne, as I told you, was a carrier of messages. And a midfield player who fetched and took the balls of his own defence and took the balls of their defence and picked them up and anticipated them and played them forward. We had Ian Callaghan, who was a crucial role to play, from 4-3-3 to 4-4-2. It was 4-2-4 then, because at that time, playing 4-4-2, you probably got booed off the pitch, So Callaghan made it 4-2-4 into 4-3-3, because he's so much industry. He covered the back, and if he played against somebody like Man United and Bobby Charlton, who we didn't mention really, who was one of the greatest players of all time, Bobby Charlton was a fantastic player. I've seen him playing in a benefit match at Anfield in recent years, and he was the best player in the field. He beat Ray from outside the box and all with a shot. So when we played against players like Bobby Charlton, Callaghan dropped back and covered him, and we cut his service a little bit. So instead of him getting 4 passes, he might only get 2. So Callaghan was a crucial man in the setup, because he had the stamina to do that. Leaving Roger Hunt up the field, of course, and keep his strength, like Jimmy Greaves. And Roger could leather him in too. He was a brilliant player. He didn't slip them in the net like Greaves quietly. He battered them in. And then St John, of course, was a strong, sturdy, cunning player. He knew to motivate him. He was one of the really key players who could be withdrawn to midfield, which they play now, and being the best midfield player in the game. Could play up the front, could play in midfield. Could tackle, was good in the air. Had brains and craft and everything. That leaves Tommy Smith with 10 in his back. He was sweeping up, of course. Despite the man said to me, he said, your inside left doesn't score many goals. He was only sweeping up at the back. Then Peter Thompson, of course, who was did more damage than anybody else indirectly by running past him and dribbling past him and giving you your money's worth, you know. I know one guy went to Anfield and after he'd seen Peter Thompson doing his tricks before the match, kicking it up, heading at his shoulder and his head, he said, I wasn't concerned about the match after that. He said, I'd got my money's worth watching him before the game. Peter Thompson, strong, like 11'9", a bone and muscle, great player. All my players were great players. Then had to change a bit. And Jeff Strong, of course. Jeff Strong was a very unlucky man. He came when Tommy Smith had just started. Strong could have been one of the best sweeper-ups of all time. Could play in the middle of the field, could play at the back. He played some fantastic games for us. If we'd have got Jeff Strong 4 or 5 years earlier, boy, he'd have been an even greater player. But he could have played in any team in the world, Jeff Strong. He was cool as a cucumber, a brilliant brain, and he played against Celtic in the European Cup, Winners' Cup, with cartilage trouble and got us a winning goal. He played with cartilage before, we knew it. So they were all great players for me. Then, of course, the team had to change. We were playing well, but to go into the third divisions, as I said, and buy Ray Clemenses and Larry Lloyds, Alec Lindsay's, because we couldn't pay £100,000 for a player then and play him in the reserve team. So the changing over, it wasn't as easy as it looked. I mean, men that had served the club and had put them on the map, had won the cup for the first time. See, winning the cup for the first time was the greatest emotional day for Liverpool in the history of time. Because they played for 70 odd years to try and win the cup. Winning the European Cup was a great thing too, but that was virtually new. FA Cup had been going on since football began, and Liverpool hadn't won it. And I think that was possibly the most emotional time of them all. And then when Jerry got his collarbone broken that day, we thought, oh dear, we're going to have a struggle now. But Jerry Byrne, nah. So then the changes had to be made. Ray Clemens had been here a few years. And he got 2 championship medals in the Central League before he got a game in the big team. As the Liverpool reserves have won the Central League 10 years out of the last 12, incidentally. So Ray had a couple of these medals before he got into the team. That's the second team league, that takes a bit of doing. So that the motto was, he got into the habit of winning. So the first result I wanted to know after the match wasn't how anybody else got on, it was how did our reserve team go on. And before I'd left the ground away from home, I knew. 5 minutes after the game at Anfield, I knew how they'd gotten away from home. I said, get into the habit of winning, boys, it's a good habit. So that the reserve team was winning as well. That was the motto, win, win, win. Sometimes it didn't matter how you win, but as time went on and you got results and you got more confidence and you changed your pattern, you played better. You entertained as well as won.
What about Highway?
Highway, yeah. Stevie was a great signing, yeah. He was at Warwick University, Warwick in Coventry. Friend was Skelmersdale, and I went to Coventry to see him at his university headquarters, you know. And there was a lot of clubs after him then. There was a club phoning that night I got into the place. The phone had rang and it was another club. So there was plenty of teams after Stevie. He was approaching his 23rd birthday then. He was nearly due to finish university, which of course he did, and he came out qualified, which was good. Oh, it was a revelation. Yeah. Oh, a breath of fresh air. Electric quickness and clever, and we're lucky to get him because Peter Thompson had got 1 or 2 injuries and slowed down a bit. And Stevie came in, of course. Stevie, we couldn't keep him out. That was the whole sum and substance. We had to play him. It would have been a terrible thing not to play him because he had pace and ability to beat men, and and a good attitude to the game. So Stevie came in and he was one of them that made an impression right away. All the time, of course, Callaghan was still there, playing in all the games.
You had Haley.
Yeah, with Tony Haley, yeah. Well, we got Tony for a specific purpose. We got Tony Haley when he was a boy, we'd have made a better player of him, because we gave him a job to do, which he did. If we had Tony Haley young, we'd have got somebody else to play alongside of him that would have took advantage of his abilities. He was one of the greatest headers of all time.
He scored some fantastic goals.
That's correct. That's correct. Brilliant, and we'd have utilised him for what it was worth. Because we had Callaghan and Thompson, you see, who could get down the flanks and cross balls. And no matter who it was, I mean, it's still always dangerous. It's an elementary way of playing, but it isn't really if you've got a header like Haley, or Lawton, or Dean. No way.
I spoke to you on the phone the day after England had beaten Argentina at Wembley, and your observations on Maradona were very interesting. You made some very interesting comments about him.
Maradona, yeah, he's possibly the best player in the game at the moment, even at the age of 19. He's got all the natural skills of the Tommy Finneys and the Cruyffs and them. Different build, of course, but sturdy and very clever at beating you. He did it in a bigger hurry than Tommy. Tommy did it more deliberate and more composed. He was still in the box, but he was still doing it in a terrible speed. He did everything at breakneck speed. Maybe he'll learn a little bit to realise that he can slow it down a little bit and be more composed. So maybe a little composure is maybe shorter, but being 19, that's quite possible. He's full of enthusiasm and ability. And the things that he did, they could have done him a little slower and got away with it. And then he would have found himself, when he got the penalty kick, he might have deliberately got past that fella and scored a goal. A goal's better than a penalty. They had still to score of the penalty.
The point that you made was that you felt that maybe he was playing in the wrong areas of the field.
Well, this weird areas, I told you, Roger Hunt played in an area where he scored goals. Gordon Milne played in an area where he fetched and carried messages. So all the Liverpool team had played in little relays, so they didn't get hurt, you know. Nobody had to run the length of the pitch. Maybe occasionally, but not always. So Hunt was kept up the field. I thought that if that boy had kept in that area where Hunt was and kept his strength, then he would be a terrible handful. Because that night at Wembley he worked hard. At the end of the day he must have been really tired. He covered so much ground. Now he's young and he can do that. But I think that if you can serve your energy occasionally, I mean, you can't burn yourself up all the time. And he is brought up in a hot climate, incidentally, in the summer hotter than we have. But I felt that he could be so lethal and to beat you inside the box as he can, as he did once in the first half, and when they got the penalty. But in the first half, when he diddled everybody in the box, he was inside the box. Now the pitch is not very big inside the box. In the centre ring and further out, it's a big place to pitch. Now in midfield, a lot of players can run past you in midfield, but when they get to the fringe of the box, it's a harder job to run past you. So the pitch is smaller there. So in the small area of the pitch, inside the box, he was still beating them. So I would keep him around the box. Have somebody else doing the fetching and carrying. And if he did that, then he's going to have the strength to finish off. I think that he's possibly the best player in the game at the moment.
Yes, an entirely different question. A young player, I mean, a lot of young people are going to be listening, young players will be listening to this. What advice would you give to a young player who feels that he's a good player, but he doesn't have the faintest idea about how to get a trial, how to be recognised, or how to break into the game? What advice would you give him?
Well, I've had a number of boys come to me, I mean, since I finished and asked me, and I said, well, you write to the big clubs and ask for a trial, you might get a trial. It's a difficult job to break into the big clubs. I mean, you write and ask for trials, you sometimes don't get them. Somebody's got to recommend you. So I say that to you, or any young boy that wants to get a game, is to get a junior club, a recognised junior club, that's in an organised league. No matter how low it is, it can be the lowest league in the world. But they're playing in a league, and they've got a kit on with a number in the jersey, and they're playing in an organised game with a referee. And to get into that league, no matter what the league is, it might be a small league in Liverpool here, it might be the Isengary League, it might be lower than the Isengary League, which is a very good league. Get a team that's organised, play in it, and keep your place, of course. Now, no matter what game you play in, football, there's always somebody watching. The opposition who are playing against are watching you. The opposition officials are watching you. Your own officials are watching you. The referee and the linesmen are watching you. There'll be a few spectators watching you, and one of them might be a scout, even for another junior team, even for a non-league team, even for a 4th division team. My advice is get to an organised team if you can't break into the big time. and play in that league, and you play. Now, I'll tell you something, that if you can play, somebody will see you play. There's men being paid as scouts, and some of them are very, very good. Now, it only needs one of these gifted men to see that, and you'll get a club, another club. So no matter what you do, it must be an organised league. So somebody's watching that league. And there's always somebody watching these games. It might be the father of one of the opposition boys who's watching these games. And he might say to some scout, I saw a good player playing for a certain team today. And he might get his name and find out about him. Now if you can play, so they'll pick you up as sure as you're born.
So any boy listening could write to the FA and say, I live in so-and-so, could you send me a list of any local teams or local leagues?
That's correct.
And he can make contact by approaching those small teams.
Well, he can connect to the local league headquarters of wherever he lives, and whether it's Leeds or Liverpool, and he can write to the local league secretary and say, so and such age, you'd like to get a game with a team. Or he might go and watch some of these teams playing on a Saturday or a Sunday. They usually play on a Sunday morning or a Sunday afternoon in Liverpool. He could go on a Sunday and watch the team playing, and he could see the man that's in charge of it, and he said, I would like to have a game. And he might say, well, come and train with us next week. Up at the top of our road there's 5 pitches, and there's Sunday training every night and Sunday as well. Now if you go up there and you're a boy, you say, I'd like to play, and so you can train with any of these teams. So that, put himself out. You've got nothing sitting still. Make your own way. Some men have climbed Mount Everest, for God's sake. That's not impossible, but they've done it. So to get a game with a football team, your local football team, should be easy. Find out where they're training and go and train with them. You get a game with them. Now if you can play, you'll play. To break into the big time and get trials, I'll say, yes, I'm sorry for you boys, it's a hard job. Because there's so many writing in. And they're only taking the recognised scouts reports. So that eliminates you. So make your own way. Go to the training sessions, go to the junior teams and say to the man that's in charge at the trainer, I play, could I get a game with you? And he'll probably say, well, come and train with us. I'm certain he'll say that. And that's all you want. Chance to train with them, chance to get a game with them. Then when you get your jersey on, blame nobody else but yourself if you fail. When I got a chance to play with the junior team, when I was back home as a boy working in a pit, and that's all I wanted, to get the jersey on and play. And I did the rest. Somebody picked me up within 8 months of that. I went to a professional team. So I'm sorry for all the boys and all the troubles I've got, and I know they're ambitious. I know it's hard to break in, but that's the best way. Get connected with a junior team of some kind, get training with them, get a game with them. And if you can play, they won't let you go.
See, I think it's important that people listening know that.
Yeah.
Because that's a tip from the top.
That's a tip from the top, because they're looking for players. All of them. So do that, boys. Get in amongst the juniors where they're training, and you'll train with them. And that's all you want to know. Get training and get playing, then you can show them what you can do. The rest is up to you.
Bill Shankly, thank you very much.
Thank you.